Just outside the town, where the paved road slowly turned into dirt and the streetlights disappeared one by one, there stood an old, abandoned house. From a distance, it looked like nothing more than a forgotten building. But anyone who came close could feel that something about it was wrong. Locals knew it by one name, the Silent House. And it wasn't called that because it was quiet. It was called that because the silence there felt heavy, unnatural, as if the air itself was holding its breath. There was no electricity connected to the house, no running water, and no registered owner. Yet the place never felt truly abandoned. The doors still hung in place. The windows were cloudy rather than broken, and a strange, stale smell often drifted from inside, the kind of smell that suggested someone had lived there not too long ago. The strangest rule surrounding the house was simple. After midnight, no one went near it. During the day, people crossed the street to avoid walking past it. At night, even looking in its direction felt unsettling. Some local drivers claimed that if they passed the road after 12 a.m., their car radios would suddenly go silent, no matter what station was playing. The elders of the town would sit together and whisper, "The house isn't empty, it's just unseen." They believed whatever remained inside could not be seen with the eyes, only felt. On certain nights, a faint light appeared behind the windows, even though the house had no power. Curtains moved as if someone stood behind them, watching. Nearly 20 years earlier, a family living in that house vanished without a trace. No screams were reported. No signs of struggle were found. By morning, the house looked exactly the same, except the people were gone. Police searched for months, but no bodies, no evidence, and no explanation ever surfaced. Eventually, the case was labeled unsolved and quietly closed. But the house itself was never sealed, never demolished, never truly left alone, and some believe it never became empty at all. Everyone in the town had their own story about the house. Some claimed that late at night, when the roads were empty and the wind died down, they could hear footsteps coming from inside. Slow, deliberate steps moving from one room to another, even though no one had lived there for decades. A few swore the sounds were so clear that they could tell someone was pacing, as if trapped, unable to rest. Others spoke in quieter voices. They said they had seen someone standing at the window, not moving, not waving, just standing there watching the road below. Whenever anyone tried to look closer, the figure would disappear, leaving only darkness behind the glass. No matter how hard they looked, they never saw a face, only the outline of a person where no person should have been. Despite the different details, every story ended the same way. One warning repeated itself through generations, passed from parents to children like a rule meant to keep them alive: never go near the house after midnight. Midnight was not just a time. In that town, it was a boundary, a line no one crossed. People believed that whatever lingered inside the house became stronger once the clock struck 12. Some even claimed the house was silent all day but awake at night. And yet, where there are warnings, there is always curiosity. Curiosity has a way of growing louder than fear, especially for those who have never experienced it. The stories began to sound exaggerated, the warnings felt outdated, and the house slowly turned from a place of terror into a challenge, something to prove wrong. That curiosity is what drew four friends to the edge of town on a cold night. They didn't come looking for danger. They came looking for answers, cameras in hand, convinced that the stories were nothing more than myths. They believed they would walk in and walk right back out. They were wrong. The four friends were not strangers to each other. They had grown up in the same town, hearing the same stories, passing the same abandoned roads, and joking about the same fears since childhood. To them, the warnings about the silent house were nothing more than exaggerated tales told to scare children into behaving. Their names were Ayan, Samir, Zain, and Rita. Ayan was the one who suggested the idea. Confident and outspoken, he believed fear only existed because people allowed it to. Samir was quieter, always recording, always observing. Zain treated the whole thing like a game, laughing, daring the others to go further. And Rita, the only one who hesitated, kept reminding them that no one had ever gone inside after midnight and returned with proof. But hesitation never stood a chance against excitement. They planned the visit carefully, or at least they thought they did. Their goal wasn't to stay long, just to enter the house, record a few minutes of footage, and prove once and for all that the stories were fake. They packed only what they needed, their phones, a single flashlight, and enough confidence to ignore every warning they had ever heard. As the night grew colder, they drove toward the edge of town, laughing and talking over one another. The closer they got, the quieter they became. Even Zain stopped joking. The road leading to the house felt longer than usual, darker, almost unfamiliar, as if it were stretching itself. At 11:58 p.m., they stopped in front of the house. The building loomed over them, larger up close than it had ever looked from a distance. The windows were black, reflecting nothing. The front door stood slightly crooked, as if it hadn't been opened in years. Samir turned on his camera. Ayan checked the time. Rita took a deep breath. In 2 minutes, it would be midnight. None of them said it out loud, but each felt the same thing, a sudden, heavy awareness that once they stepped inside, something would change. And this time, there would be no turning back. The moment felt heavier than any of them expected. Ayan stood closest to the door, his phone screen glowing faintly in the dark. Samir's camera was already recording, the red indicator blinking steadily. Zain checked the time one last time, then turned the screen toward the others. 11:59 p.m. No one laughed now. The air around the house felt different, colder, thicker, almost difficult to breathe. Even the night insects had gone quiet, as if something had warned them away. Then the time changed. 12 a.m. Ayan reached out and pushed the door. It opened slowly, without resistance, no creaking, no sound at all. That silence was worse than any noise. As soon as they stepped inside, the temperature dropped sharply. Their breath became visible, hanging in the air for a second before fading away. The smell hit them next, damp wood, dust, and something else beneath it, something old and sour, like a place that had been sealed for too long. Samir whispered, "This place shouldn't be this cold." The flashlight flickered as Zain turned it on. Its beam cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow hallway with peeling wallpaper and dark stains along the walls. The floorboards looked worn but not broken, as if they were still being walked on. Behind them, without warning, the door shut. Not slammed, not forced, just closed. Rita spun around instantly. Did anyone touch it? No one answered. No one had. Ayan tried the handle. It didn't move. He pulled harder. Nothing. The door felt solid now, heavier than it should have been. For the first time, fear crossed his face. "Relax," he said, though his voice lacked confidence. "Old houses do this." But the silence around them disagreed. As they moved deeper inside, the flashlight beam revealed more disturbing details. Furniture still stood in place. A table, a broken chair, a cabinet pressed against the wall. Everything was coated in dust, except for the floor. There were footprints, bare footprints. They stopped walking. The prints were faint but fresh, leading from the hallway toward the staircase. None of them matched their shoes. None of them matched each other. Rita's voice trembled. "Someone's been here?" Before anyone could respond, the flashlight flickered again, and this time it went out completely. Darkness swallowed them. For a few seconds there was nothing. No light, No sound. Just breathing. Fast, uneven, panicked. Then the flashlight snapped back on. But the hallway looked different now. The shadows stretched longer than before, twisting unnaturally along the walls. The stains on the wallpaper seemed darker, almost wet, and the staircase at the end of the hall hadn't been there a moment ago. Zane laughed nervously. This isn't funny anymore. At 12,007 a.m., they heard it. Footsteps, slow, heavy, coming from upstairs. Each step landed with purpose, as if whoever or whatever was walking knew exactly where they were. The sound stopped suddenly, right above them. Silence followed. Then a soft whisper echoed through the hallway, not loud enough to understand, but close enough to feel. Samir's camera picked it up even when their ears struggled to. The microphone crackled as the whisper grew clearer, repeating a single word over and over again. Inside, Rita grabbed Ayan's arm. "We need to leave, now." But when they turned back toward the door, the hallway behind them stretched longer than before. The door was no longer visible, just darkness. The house felt alive now, not moving, not breathing, but aware, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment, and somewhere above them something began to walk again. For several seconds, none of them moved. The footsteps above had stopped, but the feeling of being watched had only grown stronger. It pressed against their chests, heavy and suffocating like an unseen weight. The house no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. Samir slowly raised his camera again. The red recording light blinked in the darkness, steady and calm, the only thing that seemed normal anymore. "Whatever that was," he whispered, "it's on the second floor." The flashlight trembled slightly in Zane's hand as he aimed it toward the staircase. The beam barely reached the top before being swallowed by shadow. The steps looked older up close, worn smooth in the center, as if countless feet had climbed them over many years. But no one had lived here, at least not officially. Ayan swallowed hard. "We just heard wood settling. Old houses do that." The moment the words left his mouth, something answered. A slow, deliberate creak echoed from above. Not random, not accidental. It sounded like a foot shifting its weight. Then another, and another. Each step was careful, controlled, as if whoever was up there didn't want to be heard, but didn't care if they were. Rita's breathing became shallow. "It's walking," she whispered. "It knows we're here." The temperature dropped again. Their breath fogged the air more heavily now. Thick white clouds forming in front of their faces. Samir's camera microphone began to hiss softly, picking up interference that hadn't been there before. A low static sound crept into the recording, growing louder with every second. At 12,007 a.m., the first undeniable sign appeared. The flashlight flickered, once, twice, and in that brief moment of darkness, something moved at the top of the stairs. When the light returned, it was gone. But the air felt disturbed, like something had just passed through it. Zane stepped back instinctively. "Did you see that?" No one answered, because all four of them had seen it. Not clearly, not fully. Just a shape, tall, thin, and wrong. It hadn't moved like a person. It hadn't moved like a person. It hadn't moved like anything alive. It had simply shifted, as if reality itself had bent around it. Then came the sound, a whisper, not from above, from behind them. Samir's camera captured it clearly, even though their ears struggled to process it at first. The voice was low, uneven, layered, as if more than one mouth were speaking at the same time. "Why are you here?" Rita turned so fast she nearly fell. The hallway behind them was empty, no movement, no shadow, just darkness stretching farther than it should have. "I didn't imagine that," she said. Her voice was breaking now. "That was right behind us." The walls began to respond. A faint tapping started somewhere to their left, slow, rhythmic, almost thoughtful. It moved along the wall, following them, stopping whenever they stopped. When Ayan took a step back, the tapping stopped too. Then the smell changed. The dusty air was replaced by something metallic, sharp, familiar, the smell of rust and old blood. Samir lowered his camera slightly. "Guys," he said quietly, the audio levels just spiked. At that exact moment, the whisper returned, louder now, closer. "Stay." The word echoed through the hallway, sinking into the walls, into the floor, into them. The house creaked in response as if approving. Zayn finally shouted, "Enough. We're leaving." But the moment he said it, the staircase shifted. The top steps elongated, stretching upward into darkness, while the lower steps pulled back slightly, just enough to look wrong. The geometry of the house no longer made sense. This was no longer curiosity. This was no longer exploration. This was the moment they understood something terrible. The house wasn't showing them signs to scare them away. It was showing them signs because it had noticed them, and whatever lived inside had finally decided to reveal itself. Samir never stopped recording. Even when his hands began to shake, even when his breathing grew uneven, the camera stayed on. Later, investigators would say this was the only reason anyone knew what happened inside the house that night. Without the footage, the story would have ended as just another rumor. The timestamp on the video read 12:12 a.m. The image quality began to degrade, not suddenly, slowly. Colors drained from the frame, replaced by a dull, lifeless gray. The audio filled with low static, rising and falling like distant breathing. None of them noticed at first. They were too focused on the hallway that no longer looked the way it had when they entered. The walls appeared closer now, narrowing the space. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing dark marks underneath. Symbols, scratches, lines that looked intentional. None of them remembered seeing them before. Ayan spoke first, his voice forced and shaky. "This is enough. We got what we came for." But as he spoke, the camera shifted slightly on its own. Samir hadn't moved. The lens slowly tilted upward, focusing on the ceiling. For a brief moment, the footage captured something impossible. Faint handprints pressed into the plaster from the inside, as if something had been trapped above them, pushing down. Ryder gasped. That wasn't there before. The timestamp flickered. 12:13 a.m. The audio spiked sharply, peaking into distortion. Beneath the static, another sound emerged, whispering. Not one voice, many, overlapping, out of sync, saying different things at once. Some sounded distant, others felt painfully close. Samir whispered almost to himself. "The camera's picking up more than we can hear." The flashlight beam swept across the hallway again. As it passed over the far wall, the camera froze for a fraction of a second. When it resumed, something had changed. A figure stood at the end of the hall. It didn't step into view. It was simply there. Tall. Motionless. Its outline blurred at the edges as if it didn't fully exist in the same space. The light didn't reflect off it properly. The beam bent around its shape, leaving parts of it unnaturally dark. Zayn shouted, "Run!" The moment he did, the camera violently shook. Samir stumbled backward, and the footage dropped to the floor, angled upward. From that position, the lens captured the worst part. The figure moved, not forward, not backward. It collapsed inward, folding impossibly, its shape twisting as if bones meant nothing. Then it stretched again, closer this time. The movement wasn't fast, but it was deliberate, confident. Rita screamed. The audio cracked under the volume. distorting her voice into something barely human. As she screamed, the whispering stopped. Everything went quiet. Then one clear voice spoke directly into the microphone. "You stayed." The timestamp jumped. 12:17 a.m. 4 shadows passed across the frame, even though only 3 people were still visible. One shadow lagged behind, taller than the others, its shape wrong. Samer reached for the camera. His hand entered the frame and stopped midair. Something grabbed him, not visibly, but his arm jerked back violently, bending at an angle it shouldn't have. The camera fell again, skidding across the floor until it faced the staircase. The stairs were no longer empty. They were covered in footprints, bare, overlapping, layered over one another. Some were small. Some were too large to be human. All of them led downward. The final sound recorded was breathing, not panicked, not rushed, slow, satisfied. The video cut out at 12:19 a.m. No goodbye, no final scream, just silence. The recording file ended there, but when police recovered the phone the next morning, one detail stood out. The file length was 3 minutes longer than what was recorded. Those final 3 minutes contained no video, only audio, and no one has ever released what was heard during that time. The next morning, the silence around the silent house was broken for the first time in years. At 7:46 a.m., local police received a call from a farmer whose land bordered the abandoned property. He reported 4 mobile phones lying near the dirt road, just a few meters from the house's front gate. All 4 devices were powered on. All 4 were still recording data. No one was there. Officers arrived within 30 minutes. The house looked exactly as it always had. Quiet, lifeless, untouched. The front door stood closed. No signs of forced entry. No broken locks. No damage. Yet something felt wrong. When officers stepped onto the property, several reported a sudden pressure in their ears, similar to rapid altitude change. One officer later admitted he felt disoriented, as if he had briefly forgotten why he was there. The house was entered at 8:31 a.m. Inside, there were no bodies, no blood, no signs of a struggle, but the air was freezing. Despite the warm morning outside, their breath fogged inside the house. Thermal scans showed irregular cold pockets throughout the building, concentrated heavily near the staircase and hallway where the final footage had been recorded. The floor told a different story. Footprints were everywhere. Bare footprints, shoe prints, overlapping paths that made no logical sense. Some prints began in the middle of rooms and ended at walls. Others led toward the staircase and simply stopped. In the hallway, officers discovered something none of them could explain. 4 handprints on the wall. They were positioned at shoulder height, fingers spread wide, as if someone had been pressed violently against the surface. The prints faced inward, not toward the exit. Tests later confirmed the marks were not paint, dirt, or blood. They were impressions, as if the wall itself had briefly softened. Upstairs, the damage worsened. Furniture was overturned but not broken. Doors hung open at impossible angles. One room showed deep gouges in the wooden floor, running parallel like claw marks, too wide to belong to any known animal. In the center of that room lay a single object, Samer's camera. It was intact, fully functional. No cracks, no external damage. The battery was drained completely, despite being nearly full the night before. When forensic technicians reviewed the footage, they noticed something disturbing. The timestamps didn't align. Several minutes of recording showed visual evidence that did not match the audio. In some frames, the camera captured empty hallways, while the audio recorded breathing, whispers, and movement. In one still frame, later leaked but never officially released, a reflection appeared in a dark window. It did not match any officer on site. The reflection was taller, thinner, and its eyes reflected no light at all. After 3 days of searching, the investigation was quietly shut down. No suspects, no remains, no explanation. The house was sealed again. The road leading to it was blocked. Warning signs were installed. The case was filed under missing persons, then moved to cold case within weeks. But one final detail was never made public. During the last night of the search at 12 a.m., motion sensors placed inside the house were triggered. All of them at the same time, and the logs recorded 4 movements entering the house, but 5 moving inside. Officially, the case ended quietly. Within a week, the silent house was sealed off with metal barriers. The dirt road leading toward it was blocked, and warning signs were placed at both ends, citing structural danger and restricted access. To the outside world, it was just another abandoned property tied to an unsolved disappearance. But for the people of the town, nothing felt finished. In the weeks following the police search, residents began reporting unusual activity again. Only now, it wasn't limited to the house itself. Neighbors living miles away claimed their dogs would suddenly growl at empty corners of their yards around midnight. Security lights flickered off for no reason. Radios cut to static at exactly 12 a.m., then returned as if nothing had happened. Some said the house had gone completely dark. Others insisted it was more active than ever. One night guard assigned to monitor the sealed road quit after only 3 shifts. In his written statement, he described hearing footsteps behind him while standing alone. When he turned, there was nothing there, except the faint sound of breathing, slow and steady, coming from the direction of the house. Thermal drones sent over the property months later recorded unexplained heat signatures moving through the building. The shapes were inconsistent, appearing and disappearing between rooms without using doors or stairs. The footage was classified and never released to the public. Then came the reports no one wanted to talk about. Several residents claimed they had seen 4 figures walking toward the house just before midnight, silhouettes that matched the height and build of the missing friends. They never spoke, never turned. They simply walked, step by step, until they vanished into the darkness surrounding the property. A local school teacher reported seeing 5 shadows reflected in her classroom window at night, even though she was alone. The families of the missing never received remains. No funerals were held. No official declarations of death were issued. Instead, they were left in a permanent state of waiting, unable to grieve, unable to hope. Years later, a final document surfaced online. An internal report marked unverified claim that audio equipment left near the house during a routine environmental survey captured voices shortly after midnight. Among the distorted sounds, one phrase repeated again and again, "You stayed." The report ended with a single recommendation: do not enter, do not record, do not respond. Today, the house still stands, weathered, silent, watching. And those who live nearby will tell you the same thing. If you listen closely, just after midnight, you can hear movement inside. Not footsteps running, not voices calling for help. Just the sound of something walking, slowly, patiently, waiting for the next knock on the door. Some places don't need people to remember them. They remember you. Welcome to Midnight Horror Files.